Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Hello.
Hello.
So this meeting is now, I think, 1 hour early because New Zealand switched the time zone, and this meeting is with the New Zealand time zone because probably Tong created the meeting, you know. So I'm not sure for how long, but maybe for the next 6 months it's going to be like 1 hour early for people in Europe.
Hello.
Alright. Sorry, late.
All right. I think we can get started. We do sales today.
Yeah, that's right.
So, Tom, you have the first items.
Yeah, sure. So the IFCO is now complete, so I'm free now to go back to sales, and I intend to start work on sales iteration tree. I think Oma is working on sales as well, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. Let me know if you are as well.
I've seen that there was one issue that was blocking the other 3 or 4 that we had for iteration 3 to create a project on a cell, but that one has already been solved. So should we move one of the ones forward from 16.6 instead?
Yeah, I think so. I think like a lot of it might already be solved looking at it.
Well, that's great news.
Yeah, but I think we should move the cross join one potentially.
Let me share my screen. There's 2. There's the one for foreign keys, fixing all cross joins and identifying all cross joins. I guess it would be
Identifying, yeah.
this one. Okay. Let's do that then.
Sounds good.
Then we have a bit of headroom.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Christina. So secondly, infra quality, I had an offsite, and the offsite had many sessions, and one of the sessions was on sales. If you're interested, feel free to review it. There's a 1 hour long recording as well. Thanks, coming. I thought it was 2 hours. But yeah, that's it.
I can tell you nothing interesting. Yes.
Okay.
I did watch the recording.
Sorry?
I watched the recording and one of the things that stood out to me that was kind of alarming was the phrase "we're just starting to have these conversations." I didn't like hearing that.
I think they are looking from the perspective of the infra, how to run infra. So I think it's correct. Yes, we start having conversation how to run it from the perspective of infra.
Is that the meeting? Is that the meeting that was supposed to happen on site in London?
No, the first boot would be like 10 times longer.
Yeah. But what
So-
happened? What happened to that?
It was cancelled. Not enough time, and not enough like people from the tenant scale that could join. Because like it appeared that like I would be only myself there, but
Yeah.
no one else really. It seems like very suboptimal.
But did they decide to move it online or just get back to that?
No, it's completely cancelled. What we're gonna do, we're gonna have a set of meetings with the infra after that one that's gonna be more focused on the different topics. So you may start to see some epics, some issues about some different areas of like that gonna affect different teams from the infra, like scalability, distribution, where we're gonna be discussing specific topics, and then we're gonna also go through like all of the things that led us like to the current architecture with the infra team. To go more into detail, but basically it's gonna be mostly online. Some of them gonna be async.
One of the things that I saw in that conversation that Camille had was that a lot of the infrastructure teams probably, it's not reasonable at this point for us to just point them to our sales architecture blueprints and say, learn how it works. They have lots of questions and there's just way too much written about everything for people to kind of really onboard efficiently. So the different teams that might be affected are going to put together a list of questions they have, things that they're concerned about impacting them specifically in infrastructure, that's delivery or other teams. And then they can get more targeted answers without having to potentially read and absorb every discussion we've had written conversation about or written in blueprints before.
Okay. All right, let's go 2.3 then. Alex told me that we might or might not have a plan for personal namespaces. So I've been working a bit more on the update to the MR. Put all the options we discussed in there with pros and cons, but he will help with that. Because I think you had a discussion as well with him, Dylan. So maybe maybe it's going to be one in every organization. The designers won't like that, but at least for the initial prototype, that might be sufficient, and then we can move from there.
Yeah, it means we'll also remove the whole contribution space thing. So we get rid of all of that section of forks. And if we go with personal namespace, gets created automatically or as needed in every organization, then it basically is like contribution spaces, but a bit named without coming out with a new name and present, hopefully without coming out with less concepts in application. But yeah, I was convinced by Alex's reasoning that it is simpler than what I was originally thinking we would be doing. But
yeah, the only thing which is unclear to me in that context is how community contributors would contribute to that organization still. That they will get it's the same way contribution spaces will go. If you have access permission to interact with an organization, then you'll get a personal namespace in that organization when you need it, and you can fork into that personal namespace. So it's pretty much exactly the same as contribution spaces, except broader. It's like you don't get a contribution space, now you get a personal namespace, and therefore you could use it for other things other than forking. You could use it for putting your own projects that are work related in there. One thing that specifically made sense to me from a user perspective is you don't need to like
create groups and things like that. If you just you want a project that you're doing for work and you don't want to create a group for it yet, you could just put it in your personal namespace. That belongs to the organization. Whereas today, many of us just create projects in our personal namespace. And that's kind of like disconnected from the organization. So there's sort of some organizational advantage there that if you're creating work-related stuff, it would go in your personal namespace, even if it's not a fork.
Okay, so the advice then would be if you really want to own your content, because that personal namespace content belongs to the organization in that case, because we don't want to build a transfer mechanism in any way. If they want to own their content, they would just create their own organization.
For the purposes of what? I mean, forking, you like they won't be able to fork outside of an organization. So that limits where they can create the project. But you wouldn't create personal stuff, I guess, in another organization's personal namespace that wasn't related to that organization if you wanted it to be your own stuff that you owned. I guess owned is confusing because I feel like we maybe do have to at some point address specifically like what permissions the organization admins actually have over that personal namespace. Can they delete stuff without you having any say in it? But maybe they can, and that's okay. But
no, it's more for the case in case you get banned, blocked, the organization gets deleted, and so on. You don't have any claims to your content created in that organization in your personal namespace. That belongs to that entity. We don't give you, otherwise we would have to think about how to be able to move that elsewhere or what would happen with that. But if we just have this clear restriction and say, no, like this is what your space in this organization, but it doesn't mean that you get to keep this and move it out, which is what organizations want or enterprises want, to stay safe and, to avoid that people go beyond organizational boundaries to begin with. So I think they would be very much in favor with that. I guess it's just a communication issue to ensure they understand that this is the consequence of creating a personal project in the organization. So if it's really something, I think some people have their company, they work for a company, they do their stuff there for GitLab there, but they also have their private projects. They could not do that in the organization. They would have to go elsewhere. In the defaults, they can do that, or they create their own space or their own organization to do that, to really keep ownership of their content. That's the case, I mean.
I think ownership is a legal thing, and I don't think can be expressed really well unless we start like having policies that users agree to before they can even view the organization. I think it's more that we make it clear to all users that, hey, like organization admins can do XYZ. Like for example, like if you create a personal namespace in that organization, there's really nothing stopping the organization owner from deleting that personal namespace if they want to, or something like that, I think. Because, like if we want to get a policy, it gets really muddy when we have the GitLab organization, and then we invite community contributors to contribute and who owns what. It gets really muddy in that sense.
Yeah, so we need to check that with legal to see if the terms and conditions might need to be changed.
Yeah, I don't want to get into like subreddit situations where people think that they own parts of GitLab.com. Yeah.
That does seem like a good thing for us to try to avoid using that terminology when we want to express technical concepts or very specific concepts like somebody has administrative rights to delete this. You have rights to delete it, but somebody else also has rights to delete it. The permission to delete it in the GitLab application, and then try to use that terminology more specifically than the you don't own this and somebody else owns it, because that's far more either legal or philosophical, and both of those are probably distractions.
Yeah, and it's not a new use case. I mean, anything you do in a business Figma, business Salesforce, once you're off board, it's gone. Like that's standard practice. So I don't think we're in weird territory here, but I just want to double check if we need to. Since I just had an issue where we had a very vocal customer around privacy of user profiles who claimed we are breaking the law. I want to make sure we're not. The outcome of that investigation is we're not. But to avoid this happening moving forward, I want to check this. Okay. That's good. Happy to put an end to the personal namespace discussion. There was one more point Alex brought up, which is cross-organization interactions. And I think he tried to have a conversation with you about this, Camille, and I'm wondering if we have any requirements for this, or if we're just saying we're just not doing this at all. I don't know in what context he was looking for it. If he was already thinking about group transfer here, because that's something we will have to make happen at some point, but do you remember what that was?
He asked me, is there a specific reason, philosophical, engineering, infra, or whatever, that we should not cross organizations? That was his question.
Mm-hmm.
And my answer was, organizations will be on a different cells. So the reason is like, it's architectural. Organizational groups and projects are local to cell, always. So there is a limited amount of the interactions that we can do to cross organizational boundary, because it may force us to go intra-cluster communication to fetch data.
Yeah,
So,
we have, I think, we have in our cells goals, we have like, well, I don't remember it exactly, but basically resiliency, that if one cell goes down, then the application continues to function. Any feature that could span multiple cells violates that goal of being resilient, redundant to single cell failure. So that's probably one other way to think about it. If every feature ends up being cross-cell, then then our full set of goals is not achieved with the cells architecture. But resilience is not achieved for every feature that is cross-cell.
Yeah, no, that's clear to me. I'm just wondering if we're also excluding the top-level group transfer that we need to move content into separate organizations from the default organization by doing that, because otherwise how will people get their content into organizations? Or should we think about it like, oh, this happens on cell 1 for the original rollout, but then once we have multiple organizations, there will never be any transfer between them, because then they will start moving into different cells. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, we definitely at least need a strategy to migrate people out of the default organization. It does seem like that is more important than figuring out how to take one top level group out of one organization and put it into another one. So default organization being special, but if somebody's put their stuff into their own organization, we maybe don't need to build functionality for them straight away that helps them get it out of that organization into their second organization. But that being said, I think we'll have to build that eventually. And yeah, that will be an example of functionality that we will have to implement through some cross-cell way to migrate data or things like that. So we'll have to build it, but that will be like on demand and infrequent, I guess. But I'm actually not even certain I answered this specific question.
Yeah, it sounds like, okay. Well, it sounds like we need to keep in mind how many cells we have when we do that, and that we say initially we let them build their own organizations and they will all be located on the same cell. But once they move away from there, group transfer won't be possible anymore. So that group transfer would only work out of the default organization into another, but not between organizations that both are not the default organization.
Yeah, we definitely want to be very careful, and I know that you didn't specifically say this, but we definitely want to be very careful that we're never exposing the cells concepts to users. So like they shouldn't ever have to have a mental model of cells in order to understand the limits of the application. So with that in mind, I think we probably will have to implement functionality that allows people to move groups from one organization to another that live on different cells. How soon we have to do that is probably something I don't know if we've thought very heavily on, but it doesn't fit into necessarily our initial customers using it because people can use it without that.
So, Christina, you can think about the transfer function as a transfer that gives you like a full flexibility or limited flexibility. By limited flexibility, we can always do that you are moving some of your groups into new organization that you are creating. So I guess it's less of the transfer, it's more like the migration. Because I think the transfer that you're kind of thinking right now, and like the way how we have transfer for group is like, it allows you to move anywhere. But technically operation that we're gonna be doing pretty much is not transfer between organization, is basically creation of the new organization with move of some groups that you have access to. And this operation we can do always, regardless how many cells we have, because we would create this organization then on the cell that contains those groups that we would be transferring from, or like the groups that we will be transferring.
Yeah, that's what I meant. So like initially, the creation of a new organization would happen on the same cell as where the default organization is, if it is the case that you want to move content out from there. But then once that's established, that organization could move on any cell, and then we don't offer that anymore, because then you need.
Correct.
Yeah, and the reason I'm asking is because that came up in the ARR call yesterday, that the sales folks already want guidelines already now, even though we don't have the organization yet, for best practices on what customers can expect and how they should set this up. So if that's a hard, like make the decision as you create the organization, if that is the requirement, to be mindful about this, because you will never be able to transfer between content between organizations, then that's something we need to call out before they onboard. So that they can also keep their own migration strategies in mind. All right.
I mean, technically transfer is possible as long as these organizations are on the same cell. But I would rather say that we reserve that as an option for really special cases that like need kind of hand-holding for some big customers. But
personally, I think we will end up building transfer across cells at some point anyway. So
but it's gonna be long and complex. So I think
Agreed.
we're gonna try to avoid it for as long as possible.
Yes, absolutely. Really hard.
So right now we have similar problems, because sometimes, someone is asking on Slack, hey, I have this organization and this one, and I want to current customers, and I want to join like both things under the same subscription, or like they're asking for things like that. And I think that at the moment, what we can offer is just workaround. So maybe import, export and import groups, some subgroups and things like that. So maybe for a long time, maybe these have to work in the same way, like with kind of a workarounds rather than a very built-in solutions, but I don't know, it's a similar problem about two organizations or two customers joining one place, one subscription.
That will not be unless billing moves to the organization level, there's not going to be many changes. So I think right now they can either move one top level group underneath another, but then all their paths are changing, or they leave everything as is, but then they pay twice on the seat. So unless billing moves, that's a fulfillment problem. Once they move up there, then they can deduplicate users across different top level groups. So yeah, that's the options they have. So it will stay that way until fulfillment comes and brings it to the organization level. Okay, I'll take this and start from there for the sales information. Anything else? Anyone has? No? All right. Some of you, see you later in the team meeting. Otherwise, yeah, see you Monday morning. Have a good one.
See you.
Good day.
Bye.